And I'm recording.
Good morning. I got this book, Math Workshop, and I was so excited to read this because it helped me on my journey. Now, first, let me introduce myself. My name is Karen Coldiron. I'm a special education teacher. Um, Early in my career, I had an elementary degree. I taught kindergarten for 4 years. I went home to be with my kids. I kind of took my retirement in the middle. When my youngest daughter was in 8th grade, I came back to school, much to her horror. She was an 8th grader at the time, and I was at the middle school. So I got my next degree in middle school English and science. The only reason I say that is because I really am a reading person. But I got my rank 1 in special ed. Special ed means that you can teach anything, P through 12, but that does not mean that's your area of giftedness. And that's why this book was helpful to me. As things worked out, I've been teaching math for the last 7 years. And like that brings me to my next slide. As a child, I remember seeing word problems and they look like this. Every time I see a math word problem, it looks like this. If I have 10 ice cubes and you have 11 apples, how many pancakes will fit on the roof? Answer, because purple aliens don't wear hats. Now, as a reading person, you would think, oh, well, these word problems are going to come easy to you, but they still have this effect on me. And I read them out loud and the kids think it's funny, think I'm reading it to them. I'm actually reading it to myself so that I can think, what do I do next? Now, this comes in handy because I teach special ed, being able to read the problem first, break it down for myself. I'm really visual, and so drawing a picture always helps me. And so I always tell the kids we need to start with a picture because I'm also thinking through what would I do with the 10 ice cubes. Now, obviously, this is a pretend problem, not really a math problem, but it does. I want you to know that I have some math anxiety. It's taken me this much time to feel comfortable with most of the problems that I present. But it helps me, I think, to reach the students who have that math anxiety. Okay, so Math Workshop. This book does an excellent job of breaking it down where it is easy to understand, seems easy to implement, and it's step by step. And again, it's in a book format, which makes it accessible to me. But the main thing to remember is what I have seen in my classroom. Now, Math Workshop can't just be, and this is how I did it, I confess. In the beginning, I just put the words Math Workshop up on my bulletin board, and I cut up some worksheets and I put them in different places. And I thought, okay, this is workshop right here, but it's not. Math Workshop really needs to have certain keys, and they're here. I won't read them all to you, but you need to have something that's accessible to the kids. It needs to be a math task. There needs to be some open-ended problem solving. That's why a cut up worksheet won't work, because it can't just be there's one answer to this problem. You have to do it this way. It's going to look like this. Let's go on to the next one. Now, special ed is different because there is some direct instruction, even written into IEPs. It says provide direct instruction. So everything for my students can't be totally open-ended, but that doesn't mean that most of it can't be. And I think this is the piece that I missed, thinking I need to teach them that what's the quickest, fastest way to do this, and let's go on to the next one. So it needs to be open-ended. Small group instruction, okay, I've got that because I'm in a resource classroom. Student choice, and a time for practice. So that's what this model needs to have. Now, I like a negative example. It helped me to see some of the ways that I was making mistakes. And Math Workshop is not, and this is easy to fall into, so don't take this as criticism because I have done all of these things. Teachers are doing most of the math. There's one assigned worksheet. Teachers are showing the procedure and talking about the steps to follow. Teachers are the holders of the knowledge. So we hear this, that you need to facilitate your classroom instead of being the one that's doing the lecturing. But of course, as teachers, we are the ones with the knowledge. And so that's why I put this over here to remind me, knowledge is power, but I don't want to sit at my desk and have my power. while my kids don't get any of that knowledge. So I want them to be able to discover things for themselves, apply things for themselves. And so they have some power that comes from knowledge. It can't be, back to this list, it can't be teachers directing and students working in isolation. Don't cheat, don't look at someone else's paper, don't count on your fingers. You know, I still hear that a lot from my kids. They'll use their fingers, but under the table. And I said, no, no, no. For me, this is the best math manipulative you have. If you need to count, put a number in your head and count up 7, go ahead. I've seen adults do that. I still do that sometimes. It's okay to not have every one of those facts memorized as long as you have a strategy to get it. It also, and this is easy for me to fall into, teachers can't rescue the students. You can't see a little bit of struggle and rush in with the answer. You have to be careful about that during math workshop. It's not teachers presenting to the whole class, and it's not focused on a skill. Now, each of these, like I said, is something that I struggle with, and I have to continue to remind myself, oh, be really careful. Let them think about it for a minute. There needs to be some student choice. They need to be doing most of the math. I want them to be the ones taking risks. I want to be questioning and prompting, but not prompting so much that all I'm getting is from them. I want them to actually talk to me about the math. Let's go to the next one. So this book talks about, there are 5 steps to implementing math workshop, kind of like the 5-step problem solving plan that we have seen. Understand the problem, think about what you're going to say. This reminded me of that, so made it easy for me to remember. Understand your math workshop, what that means. Prepare your students. I think this is the step that's easy to skip. And this book does an excellent job of talking about how you're going to do that. And I saw that be helpful with my students. Decide on your math workshop structure, facilitate, and reflect. So that's the basics. Well, we've talked about what math workshop is and how you might define it and when. We're going to do it every day. That's just the model that we're going to use in our classroom. So for me, the most important question that this book helped me answer was why? Why am I doing this exactly? Is it because my administrator wants me to use learning centers? I taught in a school once where the principal said, I need to see center time. I need to see students moving around the room. But that's not truly differentiated instruction. It doesn't have to be. It could be, like I said, you do a worksheet over there. So the why of math workshop for me was the most important. It provides differentiated instruction. And even in a resource classroom, and before I became full-time special ed, I didn't realize that I would have such a spread in my own classroom. I thought, oh, resource means all the kids that need extra help, they're together and it's going to be a smaller gap, but that's not true. I have kids who are working with numbers on a 1st grade level all the way to practically grade level, and they're with me because there are some other issues, behavior perhaps, or it can be lots of different things. So the gap is wide. There are just only 5 kids. And so for that, I have a benefit, but differentiated targeted instruction is still sometimes one-on-one. The other why, it encourages independence, responsibility, and risk-taking. I want my kids to feel independent about math. I see a lot of math anxiety, like I talked about. A lot of, oh, my mom's not good at math either, you know. It creates mathematicians with a strong number sense. Now, it's a feat to get the kids to think of themselves as someone who can do math, but to give them a strong number sense is really what I'm after. As I was getting ready for this, I was thinking about how students, like I said, I'm a reader first, and I have a strong number sense, but it's because I've just practiced and I grew up and I went through enough math classes that if you ask me what is 2 plus something equals 6, my mind fills that gap in just like yours does. But number sense is really about kids who have no idea how you found that blank and being able to go back and teach that concept. And I have found that is one of the most difficult things to teach. And so we'll talk about how to do that in a minute. I want it to be engaging, of course, and I've seen the engagement increase in my classroom. And I want the positive feelings about math to increase. All of these were goals for my resource. And I spent so much time on this because I think you have to be careful and not just change the model of how your class is set up because it feels like, oh, this is the trend, or this is going to magically work if I put it in place. But you have to understand the why so you can keep going when things get difficult. The most important part about this book for me was the 20 lessons to help get you started. She breaks this down in day one. Let's start the first day of school. When we talk about procedures, let's work through these 20 lessons. So my first 20 math classes were based on these math lessons that she provides. They were very helpful in teaching my kids how to approach math workshop and go slow to go fast later. You've heard that. It's totally true, especially when you're setting up something that is different from the other classes the students might have. I want to be able to say later in the year, can you show me a strategy? Can you represent your thinking? And the kids know what I mean. So going slow, doing 20 lessons that teach each one of these with direct instruction was very helpful for my kids. There are other ways to prepare your classroom for math workshop. You want to think about, do I have a place for small group? Do I have a place for a large group? You can find that information, lots of different places. So I'm not going to focus on that as much, but it's certainly in there telling you how to do that. The next part that was significant for me was deciding on the structure. And I got a little bogged down thinking, oh, do I just pick one? Which one should I pick? But these are really basically the same. The thing I want to draw your attention to that was new for me is that students do not need to master naked problems before word problems. I didn't use that term with the students, but the way I was taught to do math and the way that you see every math textbook set up is let's work these problems just using the algorithm. What is 23 plus 5? Show me how you get the answer, and then we'll talk about word problems. Now, it's been a shift for me, but the reason that it's important to not do that is because then the kids say, why do I need to know this? When am I ever going to use algebra? When am I ever going to use this? Using the word problems first provides you with a task, an open-ended task that students can work on, and it helps them to see the why of why would I do this math? And it also ties your reading instruction and your math instruction together. So there are 3 different kinds of math workshop. This is a non-example again. One of the things that was important for me to see was I need the model to look different than what the traditional classroom might look like. For a teacher who's not using the workshop model, you might go in and see a warm-up of some kind. You might see 15 minutes to check our homework from last night, 30 minutes with a teacher model and some guided practice, 10 minutes of you work on this by yourself, and then some homework, maybe a wrap-up. I'll see you tomorrow. That's a traditional lesson format. So when you're thinking about picking your structure, you want to think about what you already do and how you can change it. This slide looks very detailed, but the thing that I want to point out is that these 3 different tasks, it can be a cycle. Your math task that's open-ended may be a way that you introduce a new topic in a unit. You can move on and use the next structure. If you look carefully, these all have number sense routine as your beginning, student reflection as your end piece. So a warm-up that is specifically targeted to number sense and a student reflection at the end. Okay, so that seems normal. The math task that's open-ended can be a good way to introduce a new concept, a new unit, like I said. This middle part is where the next structure changes. You might have a focus lesson with guided math, which is what it sounds like. You picture a kidney table, the kids working, and then they do some center time or learning stations that you've prepared. And this is where I stay most of the time, guided math, and then I have a little guided math lesson, and then I want you to go work at different stations. And I know my time's about up, so let me get to the end. I could talk about this for a long time. Facilitate your math workshop. So there are different parts, like I said. You can't get all of it at once. I tried to do that, and I wasn't very successful. what ended up happening is I worked on guided math and got really good at that. And guided math with your students, it's what you think. I need 3 people to come to the table. Now, I'm in a resource setting. I do not have a chart that has all of my, my blue kids. You come to me now. The kids aren't even aware which group they're in, and the groups are very fluid. I might just pull, I want Haley and Laylee to come today. I'm going to see Ethan by himself, and I'm going to see Donovan by himself, because really I've got 4 different levels, and I can talk to each one of them. The next day, it might be that Laylee and Donovan, I understand, have that together. I'm going to meet with them first. I'll meet with Ethan to get him started, and then I may meet with Haley later and longer. Fair isn't always equal. But I got good at guided math. The second part was I need some learning stations. There has to be something for them to do while I'm doing guide math. So I laminated everything, and that'll take you a good long time. It took me a good long time to do learning stations and to learn what the kids would think was engaging, but could do well on their own. The part that I'm going to add this next year is this number sense routine. It took me a long time to figure that out, how to best do that. I think actually I'm going to have some type of presentation that's similar to this, have it ready and have 200 different prompts or 175 different prompts so that we can have it ready to go at the first 5 minutes of every class. And this will give me a way to fill in those early gaps and to teach direct instruction. How do I do that? How do I get that blank 2 plus blank equals 6? How do I figure that out? And these are some of the different strategies that I'm going to incorporate to give some novelty. And the final piece is student reflection. So I want to reflect on what I've done, and that's really where we are. I've accomplished guided math. I want to keep doing better at this, but I feel good about this. Learning stations, that's going well. The students love having the choice of an activity to work on. I make sure that I have some learning station materials, that the places where you get stuck throughout the year, and in math, that might be long division. It might be adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. There are some places where you could get stuck and your kids could stay there for a long time. I make sure that I review in these places so that they might work with fractions. Any questions?
I will keep questions at the end.
Okay.
Sorry about that. But yeah, Miss Williams, it's your turn to present.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I am Miss Williams from Thomas Jefferson Middle School, and I would like to share with you, give me one moment to pull up my screen. Just so you know, I am not the best with technology. So my slideshow is not the best looking slideshow, and you'll see my limitations with technology right now. It's getting better. It's a lot better. I've come a long way, but let me just get this going. Okay.
I may need to hit stop share. That may help.
I have it. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Let's go back. All right. So I am presenting something that I took away from the summer program for the math classroom, which is a CER form, claim evidence reasoning form. And before I begin, I do want to say that everything that I tried out this year, I'm sure we're all in the same circumstance, whether, I'm assuming we're all from Jefferson. I don't know. So one of the things that really affected the flow of implementing this year were the COVID impacts. Coming back to school, students already weren't confident because they were online for a year, and we know all the issues that went with that. And then, of course, they especially wasn't comfortable sharing, especially the very first part of the year. And then, of course, we had regulations that limited student interactions, which would change how I would have done it. So, going into next year, things will look different, and I'll be talking about that as well. But just know what I'm going to share with you. I wanted to share with you how CER, claim evidence reasoning, is used in the math classroom, and how it's effective for problem solving in math, because it brings familiarity with what they've been learning for explaining how they're learning when they were in the language arts classroom. So it's a really good connection. So before we begin, I just want to show you what this is. This is the form that we use. This is the one that was given to us this summer. And it has a left column, which is the visualized inference. And this is what the students should start with. Obviously, the question is at the top. I'm sorry. The question that they're focusing on is at the top, so that they are always reminded of what they're answering, to make sure they're answering the right question, of course, big problem in math. And then, sorry, the left side is visualizing inferencing. This is just before they begin to think about the problem section. And then the middle section, that's the evidence. This is where they do the bulk of their work. This is where the math work happens that students are used to. The claim evidence reasoning, this is putting the answer down and explaining it. It's making sure, they're not being very basic, and it gives them a time to reflect, to make sure they're answering the right question, that they chose the right answer, and it all makes sense. So this form is a organizer, excuse me, in my voice. This form is a great organizer. I found some very interesting events come from this. It allowed me to see how my students, where they struggle when it comes to problem solving. And I use this form mainly for pretty in-depth word problems that require them to think. So not for your typical skill building type problems. So anytime they had a real world problem, this is a good form to use to help them organize their information. So that leads us into why I use it in the math classroom. CER is usually a language arts acronym. But at my school, we try, as most schools, we try to push literacy to become a school-wide thing. So we want to connect the content. Students, we throw so many acronyms at them in every different content. And guys, I'm sorry, I can't see you. So I hope no one's trying to get my attention. I guess someone will let me know if I can, if you are, or if I need to come back. But I'm just looking at the slideshow. So please let me know if something is missing, or if you don't see something I'm talking about. But back to this, across the content, they're bombarded with so many different acronyms, so many different things to remember. So if we kind of lessen it, but it's still applicable to every content, then, we feel like there's a benefit to help students go from one class to another and know what we're talking about without having to memorize something new every time they switch classes. So the acronym CER, claim evidence reasoning, is on this form, is just making them see it in the math light. And obviously it's an organizer, as all graphic organizers do. It helps them organize their thoughts. Instead of just trying to come up with an answer at the top of their head, they actually have to think it through, work it out, and then reflect, which is pretty much what the CER has them do in the math classroom. So my implementation this year with this form, my goal was, when we set the goals, kind of was more towards September, getting the year started after online teaching. There was a lot of other stuff we were trying to take care of in the beginning. So implementation didn't start till about the second grading period, 6-week grading period. And so I made a goal to try to do one every grading period, to ease it in, starting with a guided lesson where each section was explained, and then the student would practice during that guided lesson, each section, not with a problem on their own, but together. Um, excuse me. And then the next couple of times we do it, they will be allowed to work with a partner so that, they're bouncing ideas off of each other, especially when it comes to connecting to the real world. If you have ECE students, ESL students, like I have ESL students, and what you find is there's sometimes the real world problem is very hard for them to even jump into because they might not even understand what the problem's talking about, let alone the math. So working in pairs does help them kind of build the background understanding before they begin a lot better. And then as they work in pairs, I, am walking around giving feedback, so forth, but it's less me showing them how to do it. So a little bit less guidance. And then the last few grading periods, the goal was to have the students work individually on a problem using the form all by themselves, completing it, and then making it for a grade. So, they are accountable. They feel accountable for it. It could even had thoughts of it even going as far as being counted as a mastery grade. Okay. So moving forward, let me get through this. So what I noticed when I used this form, there were a lot of good benefits. One, the visualize and inference section. It reminds students to not skip the thought process that connects the math with the real world, which students, they skim through the problem and they try to hurry up and look for the numbers and get started on the math. And so this form, doing that first column, the left column, it forces them to really think about the problem. So visualizing, students are like visualizing, where's the numbers, where's the letters if it's algebra, and their visual seems limited to just the math specific stuff. Like if it's a circle, they'll draw a circle, but this gives them an opportunity to really think about what's happening in the problem. I have some examples. I didn't really do a too good of a job with taking pictures and whatever. Maybe I can put one up to the screen. But so this allows students to actually think about what's happening. So like if they're renting car or they're traveling, they can draw a picture, including numbers and, the important math parts of it, but they're relating it to what's actually happening in the real world. So maybe if it's a recipe, they're drawing measuring cups or, it's making sense for them, making them picture it like they're actually in this problem. And then the inferencing, it's helping them to think about, okay, what is this problem telling us? So, what we would normally have them underline or box the important information, they can say, oh, okay, this is the information that they give us in a problem. And then they apply what they already know, their schema, which is, okay, well, I know this about that, or I understand that they left this piece out, or whenever they say stuff like this, I know we're relating it to, when they say per, we're relating it to rate, so this just gives them a chance to pre-think. And then moving into the evidence column, this is what the students are probably going to try to go to first, because this is what they're used to doing. They do it really well. This is what they know how to do. So this part is the part you really don't have to explain. They just do the work. And then the last column on the right, the claim evidence reasoning, this kind of makes sure that they answer the math problem appropriately and accurately, because not only are they putting their answer down, including the details that they're supposed to, write complete sentences, complete your thought, don't leave out the units of whatever number you were given. But it also makes them think about, okay, well, tell me, what math did you do in words? So that middle column is explained, like I multiplied my hours to get by this, to get this, to know how much money I'm making at the end of, whatever. And then the reasoning, this is when they actually connect their strategy. When I saw the word per, I now understand that I needed to use, maybe look at the slope of, I'm just coming up with some examples that would prove or to show that they understood this particular strategy is what they needed to use for this problem. So the reasoning, it just actually makes them think about, why did I do that math? Instead of blindly, I added, because I saw two numbers together, I just added. It makes them think about, why did I add? So this gives them a chance to really think about why they chose the math they chose to solve it, instead of just doing math and giving an answer. I know I'm trying to keep up with the time, so I'm going to move quickly. So one of the things I noticed, as I didn't get to do as many as I hoped. As I said, this year was crazy. We NTI days back in January, February, kind of threw things off. So what I did get to do, we did about 3. We did the introduction. We did one another month in December and something later in the winter. So what I did find by using this form with major problems is students did struggle with the first column. They had a very hard time trying to draw something that represents the real world. So this is definitely an area to practice with them and to let them know this is not the math. This is just where you think about the problem, like really dig into the problem. Have you ever babysat before? Know anyone who babysat? Whatever the actual real world instances, make sure they grasp why that's important. What is going on before they even think about how to solve it. Another issue is students try to go straight to the evidence. They try to make that that middle column, they try to make that the first thing they start with because it's what they're used to. They go to, oh, well, here's a number, let me apply this math. Another thing I notice is they don't always put the information in the correct sections. So, well, let me continue. In general, students to just overthink all the sections outside of the evidence and claim. So they do the work, put an answer, but then everything else it's almost like they struggle even with the part that shouldn't involve the math, like the left column, visualizing and inferencing, because they're just not used to thinking of the full math problem. They're not used to putting themselves in the situation, imagining this is their problem in real life. They are trying to run a car. They are trying to do this. And it's normal because, most of these problems, it's not always something that a child does, but this gives them the opportunity, to kind of get that experience. So my take on all of this is the feedback from the teacher, especially in the rollout stage, and making sure all these things are really the students are helped as they are going through that. I'm not going to go through examples of the pictures because I really had a hard time with that. So one of the things that I, from using this, I can probably pull up a picture in a moment because I know the time's winding down. But changes for next year, going into a regular year, one of the things, the definite first thing is to start early, get this on the plate, get this in front of them in the beginning, so that they can start, seeing it, start thinking about it, even as they start math. Like, so every time they see a math problem, they now know, yes, I'm going to learn how to visualize, like spend time doing visualizing, inferencing. What do you know? What do you already know? All of these parts in the CER form is just adding to their meta cognitive strategies. They're just, it's helping them to think about how they think. So that's why it's really good to start early, because it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the year. Also use major topics, not just per unit. Per grading period is time specific, but our units don't fall with the grading period necessarily. So I think for next year, a good thing would be to plan in advance and go through the topics and make sure there's a problem for each one of those, a high level thinking problem. And then another thought for next year is to involve more peer-to-peer feedback. So it was good. After they answered, I would put a sticky note on their paper and show them parts, and some students fixed it if it was something they got feedback on during class. But I think it would be really good for them to hear from another student as well, instead of hearing from me. And of course, that would happen later down the year when they are all more comfortable. And then also prepping the CER. There's a lot of time-consuming parts, especially since this is new for students in the math classroom, because they always wonder why we got to read the problem really well. Like, this is math. Let's just get to the math. So doing things to save yourself time, to make sure they have enough time to struggle through each of those sections is definitely something to make sure you consider as you go through the year using the CER form. So hopefully I didn't take up too much time. Did I go over? Yes, I know I
No.
did.
And if anybody has any questions for them, right now is the time to ask. Just please be cognizant of the time. I'm going to have to leave to start another session. So see you guys later.
Thank you.